So here's something that's really quite startling. We think of the US as, the breadbasket of the world, right? Its identity is so tied to farming.
Absolutely. It's fundamental.
But then, how do we square that with this fact? Over 400 million pounds of food just rotted in American fields this past September,
Mm.
September 2025.
Mm.
And here's the real kicker. This wasn't because of some massive flood or, a terrible drought. It was, well, the system itself breaking down.
It's like a silent alarm going off across the heartland. We're talking about the whole chain, logistics, economics, processing the stuff that gets food from the field to our kitchens.
And that chain is fundamentally fractured.
It is. For
Mm.
the farmers on the ground, the basic math, the economics of it all, it just doesn't pencil out anymore.
Exactly. So today, we're going to really unpack this. We'll look at the specific economic breaks, the logistical log jams that are causing what feels like a silent collapse.
Right.
We'll go crop by crop, focusing on 7 key American crops to see exactly how it's failing and why, unbelievably, it's sometimes cheaper to just let the food rot.
And to really get it, we have to start with the absolute bedrock, corn.
Corn, I mean, it holds up entire communities in the Midwest. It's everything: food, fuel, sweetener, animal feed. Huge.
It's essential.
But our research shows that this year, the stress wasn't about pests or weather initially. It was pure economics. And you could actually see it in the fields.
Yeah, that's the fascinating part. The problems started showing up on the balance sheets before they showed up on the stocks. Fungicide prices, for instance, doubled.
Doubled.
Yeah.
Wow.
And diesel, absolutely essential for tractors, harvesters, everything. It hit $6 a gallon.
Ouch.
So you had farmers, many already working on razor-thin margins, facing this impossible choice. They
Yeah.
simply couldn't afford the preventative spraying, the fumigation.
And the result, what did that look like on the ground or from the air?
Well, you could literally see it from aerial photos over places like Iowa and Nebraska, these visible streaks of stress in the fields. Leaves turning brown prematurely, more weeds than usual, smaller stalks.
So the plants were visibly struggling.
Exactly. And by the time those signs are obvious, it's often too late to fix it for that season's yield.
And the impact on yield was significant.
Devastating in places. Illinois saw average yields drop by something like 20%.
20%, that's huge.
It is. And what happens to that corn? It's either left standing in the fields, unharvested, or it gets piled up in silos, sometimes dangerously high, risking mold.
Because the prices aren't there? Or the contracts dried up?
Both. The final prices offered often don't even cover the cost of harvesting and transport, let alone the inputs like seed and fertilizer. Contracts became really scarce. It's this weird disconnect, isn't it? Cereal prices might be high in the store,
Right.
but the raw corn is just sitting there, silent, in a silo, because moving it means losing more money.
So it becomes bizarrely economically rational to just let it sit and potentially spoil.
It's heartbreaking, but yes,
Uh,
from a purely business perspective, taking the initial loss on the inputs is better than paying additional cash for labor, fuel, and transport, only to sell the final product below your total cost.
that failure in corn, the absolute foundation, must send shockwaves through everything else.
Oh, absolutely.
Which brings us naturally to soybeans. Historically, America's big agricultural export champion, right? Stabilized trade for years.
The export king, yeah.
But now, same story. Silos are full, but the export deals aren't happening.
This is where that global market shift really hit home, hard. By the end of September, I think the figure was only about 3 million tons sold for export. That's incredibly low.
Why so low? What happened?
The main factor, China pulled back significantly on major contracts. And almost immediately, Brazil and Argentina stepped into that gap. They offered lower prices and, crucially, more reliable shipping.
So, okay, you've got this massive amount of soybeans, a huge commodity, essentially cut off from its biggest customer. What does that do to the beans just sitting in storage?
Well, they don't sit well. Soybeans are sensitive. Humidity, temperature changes.
Yeah.
They degrade pretty quickly. Meaning, what started as premium grain, food-grade stuff, gets downgraded fast. Often it becomes only suitable for animal feed, sometimes within weeks.
And that's a big financial hit.
A huge hit for the farmer, but it also ripples out, you know?
Hmm.
Suddenly flooding the market with lower grade feed can depress prices for other feed sources too, like the corn we just talked about. It just compounds the economic damage.
And how are farmers reacting longer term? This must shake their confidence.
You're seeing clear signs of distress, absolutely. They're pulling back, planting fewer acres, putting off buying that new tractor or equipment, and critically cutting back on fertilizer for next year's crops.
That signals a real lack of faith in the future market, doesn't it?
It's a retreat, yeah. They're trying to minimize losses now, trying to survive this economic winter. But the consequence is that it almost guarantees lower domestic production next year, too. And remember, soybean oil is in everything.
Right. Okay, so that's the foundation crops, corn and soy, where the failure is sort of slow burn economics.
Hmm.
Let's shift to the perishables. This is where the breakdown becomes much more immediate, more visual. Let's start with tomatoes.
Tomatoes, yeah. Essential for sauces, ketchup, pizza bases. So much processed food relies on them.
And in California's Central Valley, we saw images of thousands of tons just left on the ground, rotting.
It's the ultimate race against the clock with tomatoes. The system broke down right at the processing stage.
How so?
The processors, the canneries, they cut back on how much they'd accept. Why? Because their own warehouses were already full, and the orders coming into them had slowed to a trickle.
And with tomatoes, you can't just wait a week.
Not even close. A delay of just one day in picking or getting them transported can mean losing an entire field. They literally cook and break down in the sun.
Okay, but here's the part I find genuinely baffling. Prices for canned tomatoes, tomato paste, ketchup, they're still high in the supermarkets, right?
Generally, yes.
Yet, at the same time, U.S. food companies are importing huge amounts of tomato paste from Italy, Turkey, China. How does that make sense? If California tomatoes are rotting, why import paste? Wouldn't it be cheaper to buy the surplus U.S. tomatoes at a lower price?
That's the core of the fracture. It isn't just about the cost of the raw tomato anymore. It's the total cost.
Meaning labor, processing.
Exactly. The cost of harvesting, processing, packaging, transporting tomatoes, grown in the U.S. paying U.S. wages, meeting U.S. regulations, has somehow made the final domestic product more expensive than importing the finished product from overseas, even with shipping costs factored in.
So we're essentially choosing imports over our own supply, even when our supply is rotting.
We are. And think about what that means. It displaces local jobs in California, and it wastes all the water, fuel, and labor that went into growing those abandoned tomatoes in the first place. It feels like a betrayal of our own production capacity.
That same dynamic seems to be hitting grapes, too, another California icon, especially for wine. Fresno, Madera, reports of grapes just left hanging.
Same story, different crop. Fierce market competition. The warehouses and processors cut back on their contracts because foreign suppliers, Europe, Mexico, Latin America, were offering grapes at prices U.S. vineyards just couldn't compete with.
And the result for the growers?
Heartbreaking. You have vineyards, often family operations, literally letting grapes just hang and ferment in the sun because the contract disappeared or the price offered was below the cost of picking.
We saw exports drop, too.
By about 15%. And for smaller wineries, this is potentially fatal. Drowning in debt, some are forced to sell their land or just close down. Even luxury goods aren't immune if the logistics and costs don't work.
But perhaps the most visually shocking, the most acute human cost is with strawberries. Fields looked perfect, bursting with ripe fruit, but nobody was there to pick them.
This is where the labor shortage really hits crisis point. Farmers face that truly awful choice. Let thousands of pounds of perfect fruit rot in the field because losing that crop was actually less expensive than paying the high cost of labor to harvest it.
Because strawberries wait for no one.
Precisely. A ripe strawberry goes from perfect to moldy in, 2 days? If it's not picked and cooled immediately.
And again, the gap in the market
is instantly filled by cheaper imported strawberries, which just digs the hole deeper for those local family farms trying to compete.
And finally, in the perishables category, lettuce, possibly the most fragile of all.
Extremely fragile. Fastest to perish.
And in Salinas, in Yuma, major lettuce regions, trucks just weren't showing up.
Or contracts weren't renewed. Lettuce operates on incredibly thin margins. It needs immediate cooling, immediate transport. When that logistical chain falters the trucks, the refrigeration the farmer knows instantly that the cost to hire a crew, cut it, pack it, try to ship it, it's more than the crop is worth.
So again, the rational decision is abandonment.
It becomes the only financially viable, though painful, decision. Just let the wind take it.
And that decision ripples outwards immediately. Packaging plants cut shifts, trucking companies run fewer routes.
Because suddenly, moving those cheaper foreign supplies becomes easier and more profitable than navigating the broken domestic system. It's a system contracting inwards.
This contraction seems to be hitting every part of rural life.
It really is.
So, stepping back to see the bigger picture, the longer-term view, let's look at almonds. They were, for a while, this huge symbol of California's agricultural boom, right?
Absolutely. A symbol of prosperity.
But now they seem to represent the opposite retreat, even long-term abandonment.
Almonds tell the story of long-term economic failure very clearly. You have warehouses and stores just full of unsold almonds, not just from this year's harvest, but from the previous 2 seasons as well.
Why? Where did the demand go?
A lot of the foreign demand shifted. Australia became a major competitor, offering cheaper almonds and, critically, more reliable shipping and logistics. So prices for U.S. almonds just plummeted
To the point where
to the point where it literally didn't make financial sense to keep the trees alive. The cost of water, upkeep, pruning, protecting the crop, it exceeded what they could hope to sell the almonds for.
And let's be really clear here. This wasn't primarily about the drought, was it? People weren't cutting down trees because there was no water.
No, that's a crucial distinction. Farmers were actively turning off irrigation systems and cutting down thousands of acres of mature orchards for purely economic reasons. They couldn't afford to produce a crop they couldn't sell profitably.
And the visual evidence?
Aerial photos show these shocking patches of brown, dead orchards. It's an economic decision manifesting as an ecological-looking disaster. And the knock-on effects are serious. Insurance companies are now flagging almonds as high risk. Banks are getting tougher on loans.
And the communities built around that almond boom.
They're starting to hollow out. The jobs, the services that sprung up, they're disappearing as the orchards die off.
So we've looked at 7 different crops: corn, soy, tomatoes, grapes, strawberries, lettuce, almonds, all facing some form of collapse. It's clearly not just one bad harvest or one specific problem. You called it the invisible math that no longer adds up.
Right. And when you synthesize the drivers across all these different crops, the pattern becomes clear. The system is failing because, fundamentally, it now costs more to grow, harvest, and process these foods in the U.S. than it does to import them.
And the farmer, the producer, is getting squeezed out?
Consistently.
Yeah.
They earn less than the complex chain of intermediaries, the shippers, the processors, the marketers who handle the logistics. It's death by 1,000 cuts. Stubbornly high diesel prices, unstable global shipping, severe labor shortages made worse by various policies, shaky international contracts. Each small fracture adds up until the whole structure starts to crumble.
And you hear farmers saying this now, right? This phrase, it's no longer profitable to feed the world. There's a real fear of being the last generation on the farm.
There is. It's profound.
So this isn't just about food prices, is it? This silent collapse, it feels like it threatens something deeper, the American identity maybe, its stability, its culture, its independence, also deeply rooted in its fields.
Exactly. The supermarket shelves might look full for now, but that can be an illusion. It masks this deep, perhaps irreversible loss of our own domestic capacity to feed ourselves affordably and reliably.
So the breakdown we're seeing in corn, soybeans, tomatoes, almonds, it points to a really severe instability in American agriculture, driven by an economic logic that, right now, favors imports and intermediaries over its own producers.
And that raises a huge question. If the agricultural heart of the U.S. keeps sort of drying out because of these cost and logistical failures, what does that mean long term for a country that really relies on its fields, not just for food, but for its identity, its self-sufficiency?
When we see these fields turning brown, the crops rotting, what are we really looking at?
Is it just about the price of tomatoes today? Or is it about the fundamental stability and independence of the country tomorrow? That's the real question we need to grapple with.